So today I want to do a quick video comparing the Sony A6400 with the Canon M6 Mark II. In particular, I want to focus this video on why I recommend the A6400 for video, primarily video shooters. But if you're primarily a stills photographer, then I would actually recommend the M6 Mark II. And, you know, I'm sort of abiding by that recommendation here. These are both my own personal cameras. I plan on using the A6400 as sort of a B camera for in the studio here, or if I need to do some gimbal work or take some B-roll video while I'm out on the go, whereas the M6 Mark II is my new primary stills camera. It replaces the Canon M50, which I had used primarily for stills before that, and I kind of did a whole video talking about why I thought the M6 Mark II is worth the upgrade. So let's go ahead and jump into why I think the A6400 makes a better video camera. Okay, right off the bat, the Sony A6400 is just going to give you a sharper video. Even though both cameras shoot in 4K, the Sony A6400 downsamples its image from a 6K image, which just ends up retaining more detail, more sharpness, whereas the Canon looks a little bit blurry by comparison. So to illustrate this, I've attached the sharpest lens I own, the Sigma 18-35 f1.8, to each camera using Sigma's MC11 adapter for the A6400 and Canon's own EFM adapter for the M6 Mark II. Looking at these videos side by side, cropped in 200% straight out of the camera, they look pretty close. But as we crop in further, you can see that the Sony has retained more detail. The difference in sharpness here is pretty minor in my test here, since the subject is relatively close, and I doubt it would make a practical difference to anything done inside a studio. However, when shooting a busy scene outside, Sony's advantage becomes further pronounced, as I've seen in other review videos. Now, the next reason why I prefer the A6400 for video is the in-camera audio is actually quite a bit better on the A6400, and I think a lot of that has to do with the position of these microphones. On the A6400, the microphones are placed on the front of the camera, whereas on the M6 Mark II, they're placed on the top. So just to give you an example of the difference in sound quality, I'm going to jump to a quick vlogging test using these two cameras. This is an audio test between the Sony A6400 and the Canon M6 Mark II. I'm recording both of these using the built-in microphones. The Sony has been set to audio level of 26, which is I think the default, and the Canon has been set to auto audio levels. So after listening to the in-camera audio, I think it's pretty obvious that the A6400 sounds better. In fact, the M6 Mark II is kind of really disappointing. I thought, especially when you have headphones on, I thought it sounded terrible. So the next reason why I think the A6400 is better for video is the way that the flippy screen on the back, or the 180-degree screen, flips up. If you look at the mechanism, it kind of comes out and then up. And what that does is it gets it away a little bit from the hot shoe. So you could actually mount an external microphone in the hot shoe. Whereas if you compare that with the Canon M6 Mark II, it flips straight up like that, and anything that's in the hot shoe here is going to keep the screen from tilting up. In fact, with the Rode Video Mic Go, the little wireless mic system, it sticks out so far out of the back that you can't even flip the screen up at all. But that's not the end of the world, because you can always flip the screen up and then clip to the side of the screen. Speaking of microphones, another reason why I would prefer the Sony A6400 for video is Sony recently released this, is it like the ECM-B1M shotgun microphone? And what's cool about this is it actually has these pins that work with the hot shoe, which means you don't need any batteries, you don't need any cables. It connects, right into the hot shoe like this. Then this setup, this is pretty hard to beat as far as a small, compact, super high quality vlogging setup. The next reason why I prefer the A6400 for video is because of the ecosystem that it's in. You get your Sony A7 III as your A camera and your A6400 as your B camera, and to me that's a really compelling lineup. They can share lenses and they share picture profiles. Speaking of picture profiles, that's another thing that you get with the A6400 that you don't get with the M6 Mark II. The A6400 can shoot in both S-Log2 and S-Log3, whereas Canon C-Log is left out of the M6 Mark II. Also with the A6400, there's no record limit. You can record basically until the battery dies, or if you plug it in to some external power, then you can record until the card is full. Meanwhile, the M6 Mark II has the 29 minute, 59 second record limit that plagues a lot of cameras. And then of course, I can't do a video comparison between the A6400 and the M6 Mark II without mentioning that the A6400 can shoot in 24 frames per second and the M6 Mark II cannot. Just a quick note, as I was editing this video, Canon announced that they'll be offering a firmware update to enable 24 frames per second on all of their recently crippled cameras. Unfortunately, that update isn't coming to the M6 Mark II until the first half of 2020, which as a recent M6 purchaser kind of sucks, but I'm glad I'll be able to record in 24p eventually. Now that I've talked about why I prefer the A6400 for video, let's take a minute to talk about why I prefer the M6 Mark II for stills photography. And for me, the biggest reason why I prefer the M6 Mark II actually has to do with the Canon Camera Connect app. And using the app, you can actually connect to the Canon M6 Mark II over Bluetooth while the camera is off. It almost feels kind of magical. And because of that, I kind of just wanted to walk you through the process real quick. So if we turn off the M6 Mark II, and then open up the Camera Connect app, and we'll select images on camera. And this is a feature that's actually works on a lot of different Canon cameras. I used it all the time on my M50. You can see I have my M50 nearby, so it's picking up the Bluetooth signal from that. But we're gonna go ahead and select the M6 Mark II. And then it's communicating with the M6 Mark II over Bluetooth, and it's gonna kind of wake up its Wi-Fi connection, and it's gonna establish that Wi-Fi connection. And then from there, you can review and download your images. It's gonna ask you if you wanna join the Wi-Fi connection. But all of this is happening while the M6 Mark II is off. Could be in the back of the, in your trunk, in your camera bag. And the fact that you can review the images that you took without actually needing to access the camera, to me is kind of magical. So, if you don't care about this feature, then probably just get the A6400. But for me, this is what really pushes the M6 Mark II and all of the Canon cameras over the edge from a stills standpoint. Next up, obviously, the M6 Mark II has a higher megapixel count. This is like 32 megapixels and this is 24. Taking a look at these two stills, both shot on the Sigma 18-35, you can see there isn't much more detail in the 32 megapixel image on the left than on the 24 megapixel image on the Sony on the right. Now, I've shot a lot of stills on my 24 megapixel Canon M50, and I've never really thought that's a great image. Too bad I don't have more megapixels. Even if the megapixels aren't that important to me, this might be sort of subjective, but for me, this is why I'm choosing the M6 Mark II for stills and why I'm choosing the A6400 for video. I prefer the look of the Canon images coming straight out of camera. This next one is actually a really big one for me. On the Canon, you get 3 control dials. There's actually 2 on the top and 1 on the back. Whereas with the A6400, you don't get that front dial. You only get 1 dial on the top and then the dial on the back. And I think having 3 dials is really important for photography because you sort of got your 3 elements of an exposure. You have your shutter speed, your aperture, and your ISO. And the ability to map each one of those to its own dedicated wheel, I think just makes for a better stills photography experience. Also, with one of those wheels, if you just want to leave it on auto ISO, then you could map one of the wheels to like an exposure compensation. And that's actually what I do when I'm taking stills. I usually want to, maybe make the scene a little bit lighter, make the scene a little bit darker than what the camera wants, and then let the ISO stay on auto from there. This last one also might be a little bit controversial, but I find that the M system, the lenses, the EFM lenses that come with the Canon M system are a little bit smaller, a little bit more compact. For example, these are both f4, although this is a constant aperture, f4 10 millimeters to 18 millimeters. This is f4 to f5.6 on the Canon. And you can see that the Canon's just a little bit smaller. And I kind of find that with a lot of the lenses that, that Canon's come out with. For this system, and I think they really prioritize the small, compact nature. Since I don't take a lot of video, if I'm just out and about with my family at a party or something like that, I'm not shooting video, I'm shooting stills. I want the smallest system possible. And for me, the EFM system, the M6 Mark II and the EFM lenses are just a little bit smaller, a little bit more compact than the Sony equivalent. All right, just a couple other quick notes. The M6 Mark II has better battery life than the A6400 in my experience. Now, of course, there's the new A6600 that's coming out soon that uses Sony Z-type batteries. That probably will have battery performance that's on par with the M6 Mark II, if not even better, because those Z batteries are quite a bit larger. The M6 Mark II has a fully functional touch screen. You can make menu selections, things like that from within the touchscreen on the back of the M6 Mark II, whereas on the A6400, you can only basically select your focus point using the touchscreen. The M6 Mark II has USB-C, whereas the A6400 doesn't. Again, I'm trying to USB-C all the things, so having that USB-C on the M6 Mark II is important. So I talked about why I think, still shooters should get the M6 Mark II and video shooters should get the A6400. But what if you are more of a hybrid shooter? You shoot some video, but you also want to take some stills. Well, then here's a couple other considerations that you might want to think about. If you ever plan on upgrading to a full frame camera, you might take the A6400 because obviously the lenses that work with the A6400, the Sony E mount, are also compatible with their full frame A7 series and A9 series. Whereas the Canon, the EF-M lenses are not compatible with any of Canon's full frame. On the other hand, the Canon DSLR lenses are really popular. You might have some EFS glass lying around. That glass can easily be adapted to the Canon M6 Mark II. And in that case, if you have all those lenses already, you might go with the M6 Mark II regardless, because you can get that, I don't know, like $50 adapter or whatever, and then use all the great features in the M6 Mark II with all of your existing lenses. So I hope you guys found this video helpful. Leave some comments down below. Let me know what you think. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.